There are new developments in the Kherson region. As you know, the Ukrainian army has recently stepped up its operations in the Kherson region. However, the Ukrainian army is not in a hurry. It wants to carry out its planned operations cautiously. It does not want to fall prey to Russian troops around the Dnieper River in a hurry. The Ukrainian army, together with its operations in and around the Dnieper River, has considerably worn out the Russian troops. Ukrainian forces focused on continuing their operational successes in Krynky and sent reinforcements to the area. Ukrainian forces then launched strong offensive operations in the region. The Russian army is quite strong in Kherson. They occupied this area a long time ago, and the blocks they have formed are gradual and very strong. The Russian army is continuously shelling the Ukrainian bridgehead and burning Ukrainian positions using thermobaric artillery systems. However, the Ukrainian army is making moves that will completely change the direction of the game on the ground. Ukrainian forces found the thermobaric cannons with drones and destroyed them. This situation completely limited Russia's firepower in the short term. With this operation, the Ukrainian army has expanded its area of action in the region. Ukraine's aim is to completely control the bridgehead and put pressure on Russian troops in the area. Ukrainian forces expelled the Russian invaders in the neighborhood and destroyed their equipment. After that, they had to target other Russian defense blocks. The Ukrainian army did this with HIMARS missile systems. The Ukrainian army established real pressure in and around Krynky. Ukraine hit Russian infantry and armored vehicles on the outskirts of Krynky with HIMARS. The Ukrainian army intimidated the Russian troops in the rear with its long-range missiles. With this strategy, the Ukrainian army gained more room for maneuver in and around Krynky. Keeping the Russians away from this region means that the Ukrainian army can move more easily in the region. In this way, the Ukrainian army is getting stronger in the region. Ukraine's victory in Kherson, which Ukraine calls the region opening to Crimea, is very important and morale-boosting situation for the Ukrainian army. The Ukrainian army is using reconnaissance drones in the region to observe what the Russians are doing in nearby positions and their equipment in the region. The reconnaissance teams in the region also reported where the HIMARS attacks will be made. Ukrainian troops continue their counterattacks in the region while repelling Russian troops. The Russians attempted to attack Ukrainian troops, but Ukrainian forces found the Russians in the woods and repelled them with a strong attack. Ukraine also sent reinforcements to the region and strengthened its position. After repelling the Russian troops in the region, it continued to advance and expanded its offensive operation. Ukrainian forces attacked a few more Russian points and gained control over them. One of the most important things Ukraine did in the region was the pontoon bridges. The Ukrainian army managed to establish pontoon bridges in the region. It strengthened its logistics in the region by establishing 2 pontoon bridges near Krynky. The Ukrainian army will continue to strengthen in the region it controls by supplying its troops more easily. The Ukrainian army is getting stronger every day in Kherson. The cautious behavior of the Ukrainian army in the region does not give the Russians a chance to move. The Russian army hesitates to carry out counterattack operations because it is afraid of possible counterattack operations. Its offensive operations are also repelled by the Ukrainian army. The Ukrainian army, which controls Krynky and its surroundings with the pressure it creates, continues to reinforce its troops. The conclusion we draw from this is that the Ukrainian army is preparing for the offensive operations they will carry out by continuing to supply and reinforce their troops. The idea of Ukraine advancing in Kherson is now more realistic. The Kremlin is very uncomfortable with Ukraine's gains in Kherson. Intense fighting in the Avdiivka region also continues. While the Russian army continues its counteroffensive operations in the region, the intensity of these attacks has started to increase with the Ukrainian attacks in the Kherson region. The Russian army is intensifying its attacks in Avdiivka to slow Ukraine's advance in the Kherson region and to make its operations more ineffective. The Russians want to disrupt Ukraine's focus in Kherson by sending a large number of military personnel and equipment to Avdiivka. The Russian army, which lost a lot of troops and equipment in the attacks around Stepova in the Avdiivka region, continues to reinforce the region. Ukrainian Defense Forces announced that they successfully repelled 5 Russian attacks. In recent days, the Russian army has focused towards the south of Avdiivka and increased the intensity of its attacks in the region. Russian tanks and infantry are attacking Ukrainian defense blocks in the south industrial zone of Avdiivka. Intense clashes are taking place in the area. At the same time, the Russians continue to launch airstrikes on Avdiivka. The Russian army, which lost a large number of fighter jets in Avdiivka in October and November, has recently been attacking the region with unmanned aerial vehicles. However, Ukrainian Defense Forces neutralized most of the drones in the region. At the same time, the Ukrainian army launched a surprise offensive to the east, near Horlivka, in order to drive Russian troops, especially artillery, away from Avdiivka. A Ukrainian unit captured the loading tip of the Gagarin mine near the settlement of Pivdena on the outskirts of Horlivka. The Russians responded swiftly to the Ukrainian counterattack and are shelling the Ukrainian captured area and its surroundings. The gains made by the Ukrainian army in the intense fighting in Kherson and Avdiivka region are very significant and valuable. The Ukrainian forces, which continue to implement their defense strategy cautiously and decisively, are causing the Russian troops, especially in Avdiivka, which are used in offensive operations, to despair. For this reason, the probability of failure of the operations carried out and to be carried out by the Russian army is increasing considerably. We have said that the Russian army is very effective with its fighter aircraft, especially in the Avdiivka region. For this reason, it is very important that the Air Force is strong not only in Avdiivka but also on all other fronts. The Ukrainian army manages to resist these attacks, albeit difficult at the moment. However, the Ukrainian army will soon receive F-16 fighter jets. But what will happen when the Ukrainian army starts flying modified F-16 fighter jets on Avdiivka and other fronts? Yuri Ihnat, spokesman for the Air Force of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, reported that in Denmark, Ukrainian pilots are already undergoing air training with instructors on F-16 fighter jets. Before that, there were NATO-style light aircraft that were used to make the switch to the F-16 easier. Now these are flights with an instructor. Every day the number of Ukrainian pilots who are trained and perform the tasks set by the instructor may increase, said Ihnat. Earlier, some allies agreed to provide Ukraine with F-16 fighters. Ukrainian pilots have already begun training on the aircraft in several partner countries. The Netherlands, Denmark and Norway have promised to provide Ukraine with at least 65 F-16s. The spokesperson for the Ukrainian Air Force, Yuri Ihnat, previously stated that the first fighters will be delivered in the spring of 2024. When the Ukrainian army starts flying F-16s on the front line, the course of the war will change completely. We wonder what kind of plan the Russian army has for this situation. Because if the Ukrainian army carries out successful coordinated operations with F-16s, we can say that disaster awaits Russia on the front line. With the recent loss of fighter jets in Avdiivka, the Russian army has lost exactly 323 fighter jets since the start of the war. The loss of 323 fighter jets also means that hundreds of Russian pilots have died. The Russian army suffered a huge loss in this war, both economically and in terms of military power. What do you think about the developments on the front line and the course of the war?